Welcome back to Inclusion Revolution, here with Dr. Bruce Mills, or as I like to call him, Bruce. You can too. And Bruce, when we broke, I think where we were really focused on was the concept of finding a peer that you can really look to that is moving forward and maybe successfully overcoming, whether that's a person with disability or not. Mm-hmm. Although my experience connecting people with similar challenges to people who've succeeded despite those challenges has really been a great match. But as we talk about self-advocacy and becoming a good self-advocate, what's next after we've sort of connected with this peer role model?
Sure. I think, put it maybe a little in more plain terms, it would be to consider the process of becoming self-aware. The process of self-awareness beginning with being able to honestly identify what your problems are, what your issues are, but also being able to identify what your strengths are at the same time. Many of us like to begin that process by imagining what the world would be like if it were perfect. What would I be like if I were perfect? What could I do differently if I were perfect, if I were whole, if I were stronger? So we begin by developing a kind of self-awareness where it has to be honest self-awareness and self-reflection. Right. We identify not only what the problems are, what the issues are in our lives, what the obstacles are, but through interactions, but to look at strengths, right, developing senses of hope and learning to trust, but also having that self-ideal somewhere in our minds, like what would it be like if that obstacle wasn't there? Right.
So what is my goal for change? And one of the things I find with people who call me and are trying to self-advocate and are confused, one of the things that you've just touched on briefly, and I think it's really important, is what do you hope to get out of it? And I have to say that because sometimes people are just so angry that they haven't gotten to the place like you talk about where they have a sense of what it is they really want. Am I just blowing off steam at this point? Or have I identified my strengths, identified the issue, identified my capacity to address it, and now approach it with a goal in mind, rather than I hope I just mess with them, or I'm so angry I just want to scream at someone, because obviously that's not meeting any goals.
Yeah, I love anger, and I have to tell you why. Anger is one of the best motivators on earth. It is the ultimate end of the sense of frustration that so many individuals experience in their lives. I am so frustrated. I am so overcome by problems, by obstacles, by all my issues. I have no strength.
So you're saying it's a great motivator?
When you achieve a level of frustration that actually makes you angry, it can be a real swift kick that gets you moving. So I think anger is a fantastic motivator, but only when it brings you to a point of motivating you to do something differently that will not continually feed the frustration and feed the anger.
But change what's going on.
Yes, exactly. Motivate you to make a change that can function to diminish the sense of frustration.
So that healthy anger and frustration is a great motivator, and as long as we understand it as being a motivator, but we still have a sense of what our goal is, because our goal is not just to blow steam, it is actually to move forward and create this more perfect world than the one we're presently living in, because that's what we need to do as self-advocates, to improve our situation in some way, like you said, towards that perfect world goal.
I think sometimes that blowing steam is not only therapeutic in a sense of self-healing, but can be productive in getting attention on an issue that might be important. And I think Reachability does probably a very good job of matching up resources, for example, resources and skills, or resources and barriers. And that very often what you're going to see is that people who are frustrated soon learn that people who are not frustrated are very different, that they're doing something very differently, that they're making progress in their life, that they've achieved some level of success that yet I can't seem to find. And that is the crux, the benefit, the greatest benefit of what you do in matching peers, of getting people together who are similar in some ways, stronger in some ways, weaker in other ways.
Just like
but
any human being.
Mutually beneficial.
Understood.
In all ways. Yes.
Because that person will ultimately bring that person forward and show them new ways to utilize that frustration, which is a great sort of a fire to get you going. Right. But now that we've got you going, the steps of how to go about it can be really supported through knowledge with this peer idea or even agency connection that can help you kind of sift through the best way to do it or look at how other people have taken care of it. But if I have a specific issue and I've now used my anger to say I'm going to do it, I have a certain amount of self-awareness to know what my strengths are. I'm great on the phone, but I don't write letters very well, whatever it is. And I've identified what I need to do. What are some of the key first steps in actually the process of advocating rather than the preparation, if that makes any sense?
The process, as we've said before, begins with developing a self-awareness. And the self-awareness, fundamentally has to be honest.
Okay.
It's
hard to be honest with ourselves sometimes.
We cannot be entirely perfect ever. And when we decide that we're going to change, we have to make sure that the changes that become our objectives are realistic.
Right.
Because if they are not realistic, if they are not truly achievable, it's going to just simply lead to more frustration.
And failure, and what gets us depressed and keeps us from trying.
Which is inevitably self-defeating.
Correct.
So the process begins with setting realistic goals. And that process begins, as we have said so many times, that knowledge is the great equalizer. There is no excuse in this day and age with internet, with peer support groups, with individuals, with role models in the communities, with media, with entertainment even, with music.
To say there's nothing I can do and nowhere to go and
exactly,
I'm stuck.
To ever say that you're stuck anywhere. But you also, on the other side, have to be realistic. We are not all going to be superstars at what we do, but we can all be superstars in at least one thing, and that is overcoming the barriers that are preventing us from achieving something that in our lives might be very important. For you, it might be something enormous. For someone else, it might be something that to us is very small, but to that individual is enormous.
Absolutely. So, we're only at the sort of scratching the surface and we're already running out of time, so I'm sort of jumping a little. But how do we know when we've been successful as a self-advocate, other than, of course, we got the thing? Because sometimes we don't always get what we thought we needed. Sometimes we get what we need. The Rolling Stones song, you don't always get what you want, you get what you need. And I wonder how someone can self-assess in a very sort of as a wrap-up way for us to talk, that they've been successful.
We are successful when we achieve some change that takes us to a different place, to a more positive place than the place we've just come from. And we have said before, we must be realistic. And again, that step between where we were and where we are now might be very, very small for some people. And for other people, it might be an enormous leap.
Well, that's pretty powerful stuff.
Sure.
And I wish we had more time, and I think we're probably going to have to bring you back, because the discussion around self-advocacy, I think, is one that takes on so many different arms, and we have to discuss it a little more. But for now, I want to thank Dr. Bruce Mills for joining us. When we come back here on Eastlink Television, we're going to be talking about some of the medical breakthroughs that have been going on, as well as our poll of the week. But for now, thank you, Dr. Bruce Mills, and we'll be right back.